One of the most important things our friends and customers flying our aircraft out there can understand is the proper use of flaps. And I work with everybody at length so they understand exactly when they want to use flaps and for what reason. A person has to realize that with 20 degrees of flaps on our aircraft, we have the slowest stall speed we're going to get. Going to 40 degrees of flaps doesn't change the stall speed at all. So consequently, on a short field landing, the landing roll is going to be the same whether you've got 20 degrees of flaps or 40 degrees, because the landing speed is the same, the inertia in the airplane is the same. So you're not going to improve anything in terms of landing rollout by simply going to 40 degrees of flaps. Now, for a standard approach, I'll normally run 20 degrees of flaps because this gives me the slowest stall speed. It also gives me a minimum amount of drag. If on a standard approach of maybe 400 or 500 foot per minute, I go from 20 degrees of flaps to 40 degrees of flaps, the first thing I then have to do, because I've got no use for that drag that just came out with the flaps, the first thing I have to do is add power to compensate for the drag that I just created. And of course, if I do that on the standard approach, I'm adding power, and what does that do? That leaves me less power in reserve for an emergency or for a go-around. So I'm constantly looking for the safest, most efficient way to do any particular job with our airplane. Now, if I'm going to 40 degrees of flaps and inducing all that extra drag, I want to do something productive with that drag, which would be like come in over an obstacle. So the flaps and the drag that they create going to 40 degrees works really, really well coming in over an obstacle. And the moral, I think, of this whole thing is don't feel obligated to use 40 degrees of flaps, full flaps on every approach. Use them when you need them. And remember that the more flap you use on a standard approach, the less power you have available. And one of the things I also find on a standard approach is that if you're going to full flaps and you don't need that drag, it also puts you in a bad position when it comes time to do a go-around. Fortunately, our airplane is capable of doing a go-around in almost any strip. So consequently, when you're down that last few feet of altitude in the flare, if you've got to do a go-around with full flaps at a very high workload period where you're adding power, you're trying to get the airplane retrimmed, you're looking out the window for rocks and trees and obstacles and all that kind of stuff, now you've got to reach over and reduce the flap setting from 40 to 20, and that's at a very, very high workload period, and it's difficult. So consequently, if you're running in with 20 degrees of flaps, it also makes the go-around much, much easier. The moral here is use the flaps when you need them, be intelligent when you use them, fly safe.